Oh, shoot. We are so back. Hello. Hi. How's everyone doing? Hello, hello. We are here with a new internet connection. We are here with blazing fast internet speeds to bring you the most lag-free, short delay, high energy, high chaos, enjoyable live streaming experience. Wow. 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 Camera shooting at 4K. Computer's down sampling it down to HD. I feel like I still look a little blurry, but that's okay. That's okay. The videos are in 4K now, so that's exciting. How's everyone doing? Yes, screw the lag and the delay. Yes, yes. Let me tell you what I had to go through. Also, let me know about the levels. Is the voice loud enough? Is the microphone clipping? Is the background music too loud? I think I'm gonna go ahead and bring it down some. Yeah, we did some stuff to the house to get the internet down here. We got a new access point in the basement. I am streaming. For those who don't know, I live in a log cabin. And I am, the internet router is about 80 feet that direction, up a floor, through like a dozen walls. So we had to drill some holes, run some wire, and now we got like 10x the speed. But here's the thing, it's not even just the speed, it's consistency. And you know what? If that's not a great segue for us to start talking about writing, then I don't know what is. It's not speed, it's consistency. Oh man. How's everyone doing? I see a lot of familiar names in here. Danish Pastry, Kaylee Dragonfly, Frey, pleasure as always. I see Isabel. Hello, Isabel. Playing Fallout 4. Love it. As a heads up, we are not necessarily doing a big writing stream today. Today we are talking about editing. We're doing some QA. We're doing some hangout kind of stuff. Though this is normally my writing time. Normally. Shambles says, I'm a newbie. Shambles, welcome. Glad to have you here. Glad to have you. We have, I see Ruchi. Ruchi, I can't remember if you had joined us in past live streams or not. For those who were here for Novella November, let me know in the chat. Let me know, because that was a time. That was 40 plus hours of live streaming to write a whole 50-something thousand words. I see Justin says, Novella November, hope you do it again. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I got a little bit more responsibility-wise going on now, but I'm going to try to swing it. We may not be able to do the same, like, 2 different time slots that we did last year. Last year, I did a time slot for our EU friends and a time slot for our American friends. William was here. Young legend, Noviembre. Is that right? So down for Novella November. I already know which project I'm going to be working on. I do that too. I'm like, I could start writing this thing right now. Or, I know Novella November is coming up. Frey says, November was the first time I got really active in the community. Yes, Frey, I remember that. I remember seeing you pop up in the Discord, and then you were in the live streams, and then you were a little chaos gremlin, but you were our chaos gremlin. All right. Well, Shambles, I'm glad to see you here. Kiera, I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. Hello. Glad to see you here. Who else we got in here? Amira says, I'm also new. Well, Amira, thank you so much for joining. Mina, hello. I remember you, Mina. Welcome. Welcome to the live stream. I see any other names coming out here. Young Legend, I feel like you were in just about every live stream we did back in November. There was also someone named Just Guy. Wherever Just Guy is, shout out. Okay. All right, let's talk about what we got going on today. But here we go. It's going to be a good one. I'll give you a little update for my Novella November project, for all that stuff you saw me writing. I am in the midst of the second draft. I'm going through and I'm like saying, okay, we need to set up this thing for the payoff later. I know we got to change this thing that happened early in the novel because I decided not to do this other thing. And we're going to be talking about the editing process overall in this live stream. And I hope you find something that really connects with you. You get a lot of practice writing something. It's so easy to start writing something. It's a lot harder to practice editing because you have to have had written something to then edit. It's like a cart before the horse kind of thing. I've never used that phrase in my life, so I don't know if that was correct. If you could be the cart or the horse, who would you want to be? I'm team cart all day. All right. Additional update. I do officially have a developmental editor for this story, the Upon Careless Gray Hills, from November last year. So that's happening. That's fun. In September, I'll be sending them the fully finished and updated draft so that I can get some good feedback and hopefully bring in whoever's interested here for some beta reading. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. My first book that I put out, Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs, link in the description. I don't even know why I'm plugging it. I know all of you in here. It's not like you haven't heard this spiel before. With Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs, that was me just writing, using the tools I had freely available, basically putting a book out into the world with as little budget investment as I could do. Because, spoilers, I didn't have much of a budget. It can be expensive. So this time I'm putting a little bit more money into the process, exploring new things, and I'm bringing all that information back to you guys. So I hope that'll make a really good video and open some eyes for all of you. And then maybe the next one I'll try to send out to some agents. I'll let you know how that goes. I think that's everything. Oh, my hat? Did I see someone ask about my hat? Lantern Valley, hello. I thought I saw you ask about my hat. Oh, I'm so glad you asked because I'd love to introduce you to the first items of Writing Theory merch. This is the Jotbot, and this is a very nice hat. What do you guys think? And I would love to show you what it looks like if you are interested. Let's bring a tab over and share some screens, huh? Heyo. Do not feel pressured to buy any merch. This is something where if you just want to invest a little bit more in the community or you like some of the designs, feel free. But I was just really excited to do this. So here I worked with the designer off of Upwork. I know that we got some, I'll be fixing the screen issues here in a bit. But we got some hats of different colors because your boy loves hats. We got some long sleeve shirts of different colors. And I think the philosophy for any merch that I do is one shirt will have kind of a bigger design. But like, to be honest, I'm not a big design shirt guy. I'm like a minimal design kind of thing. So while there will always be a bigger design for a shirt, I will always also offer just small things because that fits my style better, and maybe you'll be more inclined to pick up something that's not like, bam, this is a YouTuber's merch. Because, you know, these are available limited time. Next time we do some cool designs, it'll be in a different style with a different artist. This has just got the little Jotbot in a cartoon style. I'll post this link in the Discord if you would like to go check it out. I also put together a little coffee mug. Stop thinking, start writing. Gotta love it. And I felt like it was weird to not at least offer something as close to writing themed as I could. So this is just a little notebook, nothing special about it. Don't feel inclined to buy it because you think it might be the secret to to writing your next big hit. I just felt like there had to be something in this store that I could put together. I did make sure every single item here is distributed internationally. So if you order a t-shirt and you live over in somewhere in the EU, I believe it is printed and shipped from the EU, not from the US, and try to send over, and then you just go back and forth. Then customs like, damn, this shirt's sick. I'm taking that for myself. And you know all that stuff. The classic. All right. I will post this link here. It's writingtheoryshop.fourthwall.com. Let me do that real fast, and then we'll talk about some editing. How's that sound? Link is in the chat, and I will post the link over in the Discord as well. Woo! This was really fun to do, and it was really cool to just reach out to, when I wanted to do this, I was like, the coolest thing I think I could do, because like I don't have great design skills, would be to just go out of my way to say, I'm going to find someone on Upwork where I'm like, I want to print something in your style, right? So like, if you're interested in this thing, like here's like the offer, like people submitted, and I was like, boom, this guy has a cool style. I love it. Let's put it together. And now we have that. We have that forever. Dragon's got a horde. All right, again, don't feel, only do that if that's something you are interested in. Of course, I love hats, so as soon as I was like I could have a little jot bot on a hat, I was a fan. All right, cool. I'm happy to be able to share that with you all. It's kind of cool. All right, let's talk about the reason why you're here. We're talking about editing. You're giving me ideas for drawings now, Jack. Teacup dragons. Is that like a teacup pig? Is that a thing? Am I making up teacup pigs? Also, Shambles, you are giving me anxiety, being like, there's lag. A dragon sleeping in a teacup. Teacup pigs are a thing. Someone help me out here. Teacup pigs are, I think actually the reality of the situation is that teacup pigs are just baby pigs, but people call them teacup pigs thinking that they're gonna have a cute little pet because they have a tiny pig. But then it just turns out to be like a pig. Okay. All right. Let's see what we got. Let's talk editing. A big teacup or a tiny dragon? Either one sounds kind of sick. Let's go to the big screen over here. Let me resize our YouTube chat so that we can have everyone commenting and kind of be able to read it. I know it's not the most legible thing in the world right now. Let me see if I can make this a little nicer. I had to switch my streaming setup stuff because OBS was just like giving me some problems. So I'm still learning to use the new hotness, Streamlabs. Okay. Big Mac Tank, hello, welcome. All right, so what we're doing today, because, you know, we're here to learn. We're here to talk about writing. We're gonna have a good time doing it, but we're here to actually leave this live stream being better prepared to be writers. That's always the goal. Unless I go on a tangent about apples, unless we're doing Sporkle quizzes, at the end of the live stream, you should have better knowledge about your writing, what you wanna do, your future plans, all that good stuff. All of that good stuff. Shamble says, what do you use to write? I use a program called Scrivener. I use a program called Scrivener. I would say it's one of the more dedicated creative writing tools out there. I actually, just because I purposefully did this, this is the same laptop I use for all of my writing. And I can even show you exactly what Upon Careless Gray Hills is looking like. I'm not going to do the whole Scrivener spiel, Shambles, but if you are interested, go check it out. They have a very generous free trial. I highly recommend. The way that they do it is you can go download the whole program. You can use it 30 days, fully featured. It's awesome. And then if you ever do choose to like pay for it, it's a one-time payment and you have it forever. It's not a subscription thing. I've been turning my proto draft into my second draft. So all that writing I did in November, I have in another folder on this left side. I go through the different scenes and I put them over here. Like here's the log book. It's the chapter I've given it. And over here, maybe I'm writing the new updated version. If I really like something I did in the proto draft, I bring it over. But a lot of the times I'm sitting here being like, let's punch this up. Let's get a little bit more vivid. Let's get a little bit more sensory detail in there. Now that I know more about the characters, is this really how they would react? And then you also just find a bunch of little mistakes that you made. So in my second draft, this is how I go about things. But this is Scrivener. It's pretty sick. We're here to talk about editing though. So let's skip ahead and let's say that you have been writing for a while. You have got something you are excited about, ready to share with the world. The question is next, what do you do? I'm going to tell you about my current editing process. And I phrase it very intentionally like that, my current editing process, because this is what I do now. I don't think I've got the process 100% nailed down. And I also think that probably every story that I write, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't agree, you're going to tweak your process a little bit based on just how you feel about that story. So here's what I want to do in this stream. This is a conversation. I'm going to talk about when, where, and how I do my different editing steps. And I want to hear what you do. I want to hear if you agree, disagree, if you have a different approach. And then let's talk about it sort of as a whole, because that's really valuable, I think, for everyone. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you I have all the answers, but I am going to tell you this is what's been working for me so far. Maybe I'm going to try something new in the future, and everything will be changed. Everything has changed. That's a great quote. All right. Shambles says, I won't be able to add much to this conversation. I've never edited anything. Shambles, you got to start somewhere. Why not start in a live stream with 19 other people, kind of figuring out the process? What better way to approach the subject? There's a thought. There's a thought. All right, let's zoom in here. And I'm going to tell you currently sort of what my process. Actually, you know what? Let me go back. Let me tell you about Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs. When I'm not, I don't have the budget to go and send it out for a bunch of editors. I don't fully, know everything about book business. I've yet to learn a lot of lessons. Here's what happened. All right. So for Starlight Farms, let's zoom in here. Making sure we're able to see things. Let me make sure my text is big. Let me make sure it's bold. You have to tell me if you can read this legibly. Is that the right word? Hide that. Hello world. Oh, you can see that. So you can see that from freaking outer space. Okay. Amira says, I've never come to that point because the only stuff I've finished is a bit of poetry and short stories I don't plan on publish. Amira, you should definitely join the Discord if you're not in there already, because we do all these little short story writing challenges, and it's a great example, or opportunity, I should say, of writing and finishing something and sharing it with a couple people, even if it's just some of the people in the Discord. It's a great opportunity just to give it a shot. Low stakes, high fun, and you're writing with a bunch of other people. It's awesome. It's so good. Joined yesterday. Love that. You can still edit shorts. Christian Bank, hello. Welcome to the live stream. All right. Here is how the process went for Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs. All right. This was my cozy fantasy story. Still love it. Still enjoy it. Big fan. Big fan. Okay. All right. So with Starlight Farms, here's the process. I went through and I wrote the proto draft. I'll even number these. Proto draft. You've heard me talk about this a lot if you followed the channel. There is a proto draft video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I highly suggest you go check it out. That would be the place to do so. Basically, it's just removing a lot of these mental barriers between you and your first draft. It's saying no matter what, the number one purpose of what you're writing at the very beginning of the project is just to make progress, right? It's just to say like, you know what? I'm going to choose to rename my main character. And you know what? I'm not going to go back over the past 10,000 words and make all those changes again. I'm going to switch the POV right here in chapter 8 because I think this other POV will work. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep writing. We're going to be editing. Yeah, I mean, you get it. You get it. I don't need to keep going. So I wrote the proto draft. And in fact, I have the proto draft printed somewhere under that desk over there. Orchid, hello, hello. I can read text as small as, okay, the bold's probably unnecessary unless someone's watching on mobile. That's fair, that's fair. Is the bold, here's the question, is the bold too bold? Okay. So I wrote the proto draft, and that was like 40,000 words. That was fun, that was exciting, good times. What happens after the proto draft? Then you take everything you know about your story, because it's taken you however many hours to get to the end, and you've learned a lot of things. You said, all right, you know, at the beginning of the story, I was like, you know, here's these characters I want to bring into my story. And by the end of the story, you're like, I will die for these characters. But also, I'm going to put them through trials and tribulations. But like, I would die for them. I love them, right? You know your characters so much more by the end. So after you finish your proto draft, I printed mine out. I went to a coffee shop. I took a stack of note cards. And at the beginning of every chapter, I taped a note card in there. And I said, here's what needs to change about this chapter. I also took notes in Scrivener in the proto draft. Just things I knew intuitively, like this scene wasn't impactful enough, or like I'm gonna have to build up a moment earlier on to make this moment pay off, or a reminder, I need to emphasize this point so this point makes sense. Lots of these little things as I was writing the proto draft. Now, important to note here, and I would love to hear your opinion on this. Do you edit while you are drafting? And I'm talking about this first, like getting your story down. What do you do? Danish Pacer says, as a perfectionist, I can't do that. All right, so we got William does edit while they draft. Danish Pastry does edit while they draft. Am I the weird one? Rarely, unless I know I want a large chunk gone, from Isabel. Never edit while drafting. I'm not a masochist. Shambles got me in shambles. I'm a pantser, so I absolutely edit mid-draft. If I do, fairly small. Frey says I edit, but I shouldn't. Lots of good answers here. I edit during the first draft because I'm not happy with what's on page. I can't go on. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's totally fair, Josh. Ruchi says I do edit, but I somehow make it worse. Oof. Also, relatable. J Sam says, yes, I do, or I can't keep track. Early mid-draft. Editing mid-draft kills my momentum. So it sounds to me like there is definitely not a surefire answer for whether you should or should not edit in the draft. The advice I've always kind of heard was to not edit in your draft, but very clearly it seems to be working for a lot of people. So I wouldn't say that that is the de facto advice to follow. I do not edit mid-draft because I'm worried that life comes at you fast, and for everything else, there's MasterCard. And by that, I mean, the longer it takes me to finish a draft, the more I'm worried some sort of life event is going to interrupt this, and I'm going to lose that momentum. I'm going to lose that excitement. I'm going to fall out of the habit. And the only thing, in my opinion, the only thing harder than writing a book is finishing a book you've partway started months after the fact. Because there's another shiny idea waiting for you. Amira says, I mean, if you notice something is wrong and continue, couldn't it be unproductive? I see what you're saying. You're saying if there's such a big glaring issue that if you don't fix that issue, the rest of that draft as you continue is going to be either so potentially incorrect or like needs so much editing it would be like writing it anew. That could be the case. I feel like as much as I like sort of pantsing my way through writing my characters, there's been very few amount of times where I feel like I put something on the page that was so off base that it was throwing everything off. That's just my opinion, though. And maybe that's just one of those things of like plotter versus pantser. I bet a plotter runs into that less often than a pantser would. Shiny squirrel. I read that as shiny squirrel writing temptation. But it's also true. I think the problem, I think, this is what Shambles says. The problem, I think, with editing mid-draft is that you'll spiral and just start editing and never moving on. Editing is for the rewrite and the drafts after. William says, for some people, yes, which is generally the reason for advice not to. There you go. But I think, I hesitate to say there's an answer there. I think it's just a personal preference. I think I'm always excited about writing the next scene and moving the progress of the novel forward more than I'm worried about what I wrote, last chapter being as fine. That's probably a better word to use there. So maybe that'll change. Maybe I'll experiment and do it a little different next time. So with Starlight Farms, I wrote the proto draft. I went through and this was all developmental edits. Maybe I'll say that. Developmental edits. This is me saying, let me look at the entire structure of the novel and I'm focusing on the big picture things. Did we spend enough time in this moment of like emotional turmoil halfway through the book, or did it go by too fast? In order to have this climax really pay off, what do I need to set up earlier on that gives the reader the context they need to really feel that? You know what I mean? I'm a huge fan of the setup and the payoff. I think about that almost as much as I think of my characters. I am constantly thinking, what can I do in this moment that I could build off of or reference or twist in some way later on, and it feels satisfying to the reader. I'm trying that. That doesn't mean I successfully nail it every time, but that's what I'm thinking. The heart is there. The talent now needs to follow. And ain't that the life of a writer? Ain't that it? All right. Developmental edits. This is all big picture things. Important to note, in my own personal preference, I am not touching any sort of grammar, of spelling. I'm not in here trying to make every sentence shine, which I think is also worth putting here. The story is going to be edited so much, it's almost not even worth it. In fact, for Starlight Farms, I rewrote the entire thing, so this would have been totally wasted time. Not spelling or grammar. What happens next? After a developmental edit, I take it to what I call the first draft. You can replace all these terms with what intuitively makes the most sense for you. And this is where, I'm creating... Oh, you know what? This is also another thing to say. One of the big, I think, stopping blocks, roadblocks maybe for a lot of people, is I'm writing my draft, but I don't feel like it's good enough to share. Does that make sense? I'm writing my draft, but I know I'm not fully happy with it. You hear advice, which I don't like to repeat. I think there's probably a better way to go about it. Which is people saying your first draft is gonna suck. Has anyone here heard that advice yet? Whether it be on a podcast, whether it be in a writing book, your first draft is gonna suck. I've heard that like constantly, all the time. My first drafts tend to be polished enough to share. I wish I could relate. Haven't decided whether or not it's reassuring. Heard it and felt it. What is a proto draft? I'm confused now that I see the first draft. Oh, Big Mac Tank, there's a great YouTube video waiting for you on my channel called the Proto Draft. All right. Not just the first draft, but the first novel. I think that's not right. Because I also think you can look at this in the same way as like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. What you and I consider to be perfect books are probably not the same thing. All right, so here's what I'm saying. All right, the proto draft, there a roadblock that's you're almost guaranteed to run into at some point is you're going through, you have this potential, this understanding in your head. In fact, let's go big screen because this is so important. I wish I had my cool transition that I had before instead of me just like popping in. Okay. Also, let me turn this down a little bit. There we go. I'd rather not look into the eyes of a beholder. Mods, time her out. I've always wanted to say that. All right. All right, so here we go. This is important. So I think especially early on in the writing, I don't want to say career, journey, in the writing journey, you know, you're still kind of like getting your legs underneath you for understanding story, understanding presenting characters, understanding plot. There's a lot of stuff to consider. I totally get that. What is likely to happen? What is likely to happen is that you have in your head this amazing understanding of your world, the things that need to happen, your characters, how you want other people to feel about that story. You are going to have these thoughts in your head about, I'm going to write this and people are going to feel it. But the thing is, as soon as you start putting words down, as soon as pen meets paper, rubber meets road, is that the expression? As soon as you start going, you are now suddenly limited by your ability to tell that story. And that stinks. And I think a lot of people say, oh, that means your first draft sucks because like you thought it could be a certain level of like, everyone's going to love this. You start putting it down and you realize your exposition wasn't, you know, where it needed to be. Maybe you were too wordy here. You try to have this big emotional payoff and like you're worried people aren't going to connect with it. You have all these moments and maybe they're not hitting, right? Rubber meets the bad drawing I just made and I erase it while crying. As someone who only does digital art, I cannot relate. Here's the deal. I think this is a lot of the times a roadblock for some people is like, even when you're halfway through that first proto draft that you're doing, that's what I call it, of course, you start to get demoralized because like it's not quite hitting the potential that you have in your head. Remember this, the very first draft, that proto draft, is not for anyone else. It is for you to look at and get excited. It is for you to see the composition of your story. It is for you to say like, look what I made. This thing wouldn't exist in the world if I didn't sit down and do this. That does not mean you're ready to put that out in the world, give it to someone, and they're going to be as excited as you were when you were writing it. That's what editing is for. Editing is not just like, I'm going to fix the grammar, I'm going to make sure I spelled everything. Editing is when you sit down with your story and you say, okay, I'm going to stop thinking about myself. I'm trying to take myself out of the equation. Now, I want to make these fine-tuned little changes to my story so that when I give it to someone, they have everything they need to love this story like I love this story. The first draft is basically for the I did that feeling. It is. And it's also so that you have something to refine. What's that? You can't edit a blank page? I mean, come on. Come on. That's a legendary saying. Also, I'm getting hot. Again, check out the merch store for these cool little hats and shirts. Okay. All right. You know that struggle when you're having a good hair day, but you also want to wear a hat? Ugh. Am I right? Go in chat, let me know. You know those days, good hair day and good hat day. What do you do? Man, let's go back to my screen here. Young Legend says, I thought writing was going to be one and done. Editing and rewriting never crossed my mind. Young Legend, it is, you cannot really have writing. Hold on, I don't want to say it in absolutes. What's the right way to say this? Any writing that you want to share with the world is probably going to go through edits. Now, you can share things without edits, and maybe you're have a strong enough understanding of your story that you just nail it right off the bat. That's great. Any writing that you read out on a bookshelf or something has not only gone through edits and rewrites, it's likely gone through like 14 months of edits and rewrites by a whole team of people. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. We're gonna fall behind. What happens after the first draft? What happens after the first draft? We had our developmental edits. We turned that into our first draft. Now I think we have more general edits, which is, again, looking at scenes, tightening up things. This is like us making sure the voice of all of our characters are really like correct. This is what I did, at least in my process. So Amira has a great question. What about test readers? In Starlight Farm's Kennel for Talking Dogs, I did not do any beta readers, which is something I'm going to experiment more in my next novel, Upon Careless Gray Hills. Now, you may be asking, why did you not do beta readers? Well, one, it was the idea of like, if I'm going to ask people to beta read my book, I'm probably going to pay them personally. Even if they're in this community, I would love to have some beta readers here, but I'm going to choose the people who I think are going to give me that kind of strong feedback that I need, but I'm also going to compensate them for their time because they're performing a service, you know? And at this point in time, I didn't really have the budget to really want to experiment with all that. And I feel like I missed out for sure. But, you know, you have to make decisions. So in my case, my beta reader is my wife. I took my edit at this point, I gave it to my wife, and I said, I'd love for you to read this and jot down any questions that you have, things that you feel didn't quite land, kind of what you're feeling at different parts. If you feel really good about something or really bad about something, I want to know about it. And so she read it and she gave me something like 12 points back. And it was throughout the whole thing, it was like, here's, you know, I didn't quite get this, or like, you know, it didn't feel like this was high stakes enough. So you could say, I'm going to say beta reader-ish because it was just my wife. Oh, it's Zenderfall. Hello, Zenderfall. Zenderfall says, yep, we sure have a top-notch beta in the Discord. There you go. Is your wife a pro writer too, or a normie? My wife has never been inclined to write creatively in her entire life outside of school assignments. Solitude Without a Soul. Hello, hello. Lantern Valley. I don't know if I shouted you out before, but I did see you coming here. And I love that. Okay, beta reader-ish. Refinements, maybe. I'm just going to zoom through here for lack of a better word. Here's something I covered in the most recent video about critique. And I've talked about this. I have a video I feel really proud of that I did about Brandon Sanderson's beta reading. I backed some Kickstarter forever ago. And one of the rewards that I got was for a Brandon Sanderson novella. And it was like, not only like the 4 drafts leading up to that final draft, but the beta reading notes from beta readers. And so I went through there. I have a video. There's like a whole Google Sheets template you can download if you want to use it yourself. And I learned a lot about the beta reading process from watching this. And in doing that research, I came across some notes Brandon Sanderson left about this whole process. And basically it was him reiterating the fact that, like, even when beta readers are giving you feedback, you are the final say. You are the author. It's your story. You know it best. You know what your intentions are. And so even if someone's like, this moment wasn't really like super impactful, it's still up to you to say whether or not you want to take that advice. Maybe your intention at that scene wasn't to have a big emotional moment. Maybe it was to set something up for later. Maybe you do want to listen to that advice and punch it up. But you are the filter between every good, bad kind of advice that comes in. Shambles says, so you don't gotta take advice. You don't. This is your story. You don't even have to do beta reading. But what's the value of beta reading then? And before I give my answer, let me ask you, why do authors want to do beta reading? What do you think is the importance or the value of beta reading? 69, welcome to the chat. What do you think the purpose of beta reading is? So we know what works for readers and what doesn't work. Mina says, don't add rats with swords to your book. I've heard that somewhere. It's something like that. I know what quote you're talking about. Think now, analyze all advice, decide if it's relevant. Isabel says, getting some other eyes on the draft because you could be blind to certain elements. Corby says, I see beta reading as seeing the story through the reader's experience, developmental editing, and other editors aren't through the technical lens. There's always going to be a disconnect between what's in my head and what ends up on the page. Hard to tell what that is without a beta reader. I think that's fair. Amira says, getting a sense of confidence in the own creation. Okay. Kaylee says, I think that at any point, authors just need to feel like their work is being acknowledged. Interesting. Kiara says, to see what speaks to readers, what you should play up. I kind of use beta readers as a developmental editor. Is William still in the chat? I feel like William has a really good mind for this kind of stuff. I'd love to hear William's opinion as well. Eumenides. Hello. Can also be motivating to get feedback in the short term. Now, this is interesting because... Hello, William. This is interesting because I'm hearing two very different things here. I hear some people saying it's motivational. Right? Saying beta reading's motivational. William, I was going to say, I would love to know what you think the real value for beta reading is. Why do authors go to beta readers? What are they trying to get from the beta readers? That was the question. If you're busy, don't worry about it. Solitude Without Soul, beta reading helps you get feedback what the reader is feeling. Great beta reader will give you insights on the reader's feel and experience, other stuff that Corby said. All right. So here's the thing. I'm seeing two main things in chat. One, I'm hearing things about how the author is going to feel. It's going to give me confidence. I'm going to share my work with beta readers and they're going to tell me good things. It's like kind of what I'm hearing. Or potentially they're going to tell me bad things and it's going to be like destructive to my ego. Maybe I was feeling too good. But I don't think that's really the case. I think part of the value for beta readers is not anything intrinsic of like, I want to feel good. You know, I think, in my opinion, the value of beta readers is that you are so close to your novel. You have so much context in your head about who your characters are, what they should be doing, what's the theme of the novel, how does this piece fit in with this piece, and you're trying to put together this what could be 100,000 word kind of novel that's going to do all that well. But the thing is, you can only take that so far. Someone else said something about being blind to certain elements of your story. That will definitely be the case. You will spend too long in the weeds of your story to be able to look at it with a fresh perspective. In user testing, William says, I think Cora had it. Beta readers are readers with a reader's perspective. Ideally, they're not writers. Also great points. So they wouldn't be trying to restructure any craft aspects, but their concerns will point to writer issues. Great point there. There's a difference between a developmental editor and a beta reader. Beta readers should just be readers. Developmental editors should be developmental editors. Okay. You will be so like into your story. You're going to spend at this point 100 hours typing on a keyboard trying to tell that story. You will eventually just be blind to certain things. You're going to be blind to how you introduced your character in a way where you didn't know them, and then you read this thing and you kind of knew them. Because when you wrote that, you already knew that character in your head. You had already planned it out. You kind of had a feeling of where they were supposed to go. And so what the beta reader provides you is that valuable insight that has no context about your story. That way, and one of the greatest examples of this is that science fiction authors, I hear this all the time, and for a part of it, I think fantasy authors too. Science fiction authors are at least the ones that we have in our Discord who are kind of trying to nail down exactly how to go about this process. One of the biggest worries I see with them is like, am I doing too much exposition? Am I doing too much world building? Like, I dreamt up this cool world and I want to tell the reader about it, but like, the worry is always, am I doing too much with it? Am I just saying like, all right, this next for the next 4 paragraphs, I'm going to tell you about how telephones work in my story. It's not a great reading experience, but like, you've spent so much time planning that, you need to get that information to the reader. You're trying your hardest. A beta reader is going to come in and say, this section was really dry, or I was still really confused about this concept. And it's that external sort of that view of someone coming in with a fresh perspective that you cannot provide. That's the value. William definitely saying they should not be writers. That is an important thing. You're not really looking for a developmental edit. As a beta reader, you're looking for feedback like, I really liked this moment, or like, this made me laugh, or like, this made me cry, or like, this doesn't feel like what the character would say. Like, this person was acting out of character. Or like, here's one of the big things I saw in Brandon Sanderson's book, ending a chapter where the characters are in one location and starting the next chapter where they're in another location. And the reader being like, wait a minute, how did they get from point A to point B? As an author, I don't care. I just want to take you to the next scene. I want to take you to that next important moment. But if a reader's left confused about where we are, I need to know that. That's the beta reader kind of insight. Orchid Birch. I always feel attacked by criticism. I let it rest a day, then analyze if the criticism was right. We talked about refinements. You are the filter. One of the interesting points I saw in Brandon Sanderson's comments was that this was for the novella Dawn Shard, I believe is what it's called. Dawn Shard, there's a traitor in the midst of the story, and 75% of the way through the novel, we find out who the traitor is, right? Some of the beta readers said, I kind of like saw this coming. Like, there were too many breadcrumbs leading. Like, I called this back in chapter 3. Now, if you're Brandon Sanderson, what do? Well, you can either say, man, I want my book is meant to be not a thriller, but more of a mystery to solve, which means like the whole climax of the story is the butler did it, right? The purpose of a mystery story is to solve the crime, right? But in Brandon Sanderson's own notes that he typed for people who happen to be reading this little Kickstarter deliverable, he said that I had to make a decision on whether or not the point of the story was, this is a mystery, who's the traitor? Oh, it's the butler. That's the end of the story. But instead, he said, I have to decide between that or if this book is a thriller. if it's more on the thriller side of things. Now, what's the difference between a mystery and a thriller? Sanderson said a thriller is, okay, we have a killer in our midst. Now, what do we do about it? That's part of the story. While a mystery was, we got to solve the crime. It's the Scooby-Doo yanking off the mask. We've done it. And yet, like Agatha Christie, it's kind of the Agatha Christie model. That's a mystery. We've solved the mystery. Versus a thriller, there's a killer in our midst. We figured out who it is. Now there's a killer in our midst. Okay, and we know it, right? So, do they go hand in hand, Shambles says. I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover with how you want to write it. But as an author, you still sort of get to make that decision. The point of my story wasn't figuring out who the traitor is. The point of the story was, once we knew who the traitor was, how do we foil their plans? That's the thriller. That's the point of the story. It doesn't really matter to me, so much so that you didn't see who the killer coming was. Isabel says, that's the value in having multiple readers as well. If a variety of people have the same concern, it's a lot more notable. That's another thing I talk about in the video that came out on Monday, was like, if a lot of people are giving you the same feedback, you should be very mindful of it. No way around it. But you still are the filter between what advice you're getting back, what you're going to change about your story, all that good stuff. I love, and I still firmly believe that 5 beta readers is the most optimal number of beta readers, as long as you're choosing these people, I think, efficiently. Meaning that if you're writing a fantasy novel, maybe you shouldn't only recruit fantasy, what's the right word? Savants? Fantasy sommeliers who have like a super fine palette of fantasy stories. I guess it kind of depends on what your story is going to be about. You may want to diversify. In user testing, user design, and this comes from my background in the tech industry, the rule of thumb is that when one person gives you feedback on, in this case, it would be like a product. When one person gives you feedback, you are going to get 100% new information that you can decide how you want to use. When you get your second person to give you feedback, a large percentage of the new feedback they give you will probably overlap with what the first person already told you. If there was a glaring issue in Act 2 of your book, both readers are probably going to tell you that. Right? And so someone did the math. You can Google this. I can't remember the actual... I don't remember the actual source. But the optimal number, if you get 15 people, they say you get 100%, basically, for lack of a better term, essentially 100% of like the feedback you need for 100% of what your user base would be. 15 people will give you all of that information. But 5 people will give you 85% of that valuable feedback. And you start to get those diminishing returns after that. So that's what I'm going to be doing for my book. In this case, after beta reader for refinements for Starlight Farm's Kindle for Talking Dogs, I made a mistake and I rewrote the whole thing. I don't really recommend this. I have a whole live stream where I did a breakdown of this book, where I talked about the things I liked about it and the things in the book that I feel like I didn't quite do as well. So if you want a very realistic view of what that's like, there's a live stream out there. And then I did copy editing, style editing. Let's do this better. Copy, edit, style, edit. Basically, I went through and I tried to catch all the grammar, all the spelling, made sure all the right things were capitalized, all that good stuff. Style editing, as what I've always heard it, which is like making sure, in this case, I was trying to write specifically in a, like, my natural writing style is kind of direct. I've spent my whole life in a profession where it's like, just get the point across. It's technical writing. So like my creative writing style is also a little similar to that. Which after I had done all of the stuff, I felt like my prose wasn't the right style for this book. And so I rewrote the whole thing, really trying to emphasize the cozy fantasy aesthetic and vibe in the prose. And then copy editing is like all the language stuff. Style edit is always what I've heard it referred to for making sure your word choice fits the reader's current experience. Are we in a dark and gloomy moment? Our prose should reflect that. Are we in a fantasy novel? Yes, we are. Our prose should reflect that. Are we in a bit happy moment? We should be choosing words that sort of reflect what the reader's currently feeling, and we can kind of tie these two things together. And then that way, when we want to control how the reader feels, this is another tool in our arsenal. That's always what I've heard that. Zenderfall says, I think the biggest difference between developmental editors and beta readers are beta readers aren't restricted by the Hippocratic Oath, quote, quote, while good DEs are. That's not to say beta readers are worse, just that. I think that developmental editors you bring on for their knowledge and story, beta readers you bring on because they're a reader. I don't want developmental editing from a reader who thinks they know better than me. I want them to say, this made me feel good or this made me feel bad. And then lastly, I did what's called a sanity check, which is reading through my book again, really slowly, reading everything out loud, trying to catch any typos, basically just reading this whole thing one last time to catch anything I might have missed, and then send, oh, hold on. What the heck? That boy out. For myself, personally, this is where I use Pro Writing Aid for my copy and style edits. That's my tool of choice. I already have it. All that good stuff. Big Mac Tank says, I'm not the only person who struggles with direct writing. Awesome. Yeah. You know, there's literally dozens of us. 59, I'm now inspired to write a campfire scene that makes the reader want to eat marshmallows. Honestly, sounds like a great writing exercise. Write a scene that makes the reader hungry. Kaylee Dragonfly says, can you elaborate on the sanity check? The sanity check is probably what other people in like a more formal writing process would call gamma reading. Anyone here ever heard of gamma reading? Which is like just trying to catch silly mistakes. Just like, you know, I'm not going to be making sure I'm not using the wrong version of there, or making sure I'm not mistyping the word to, or like if for whatever reason I put XXX instead of a paragraph, maybe that's what sanity checking would try to catch. No, I mean, not to, I don't know if that's specific enough or not. Like leaving XXX in the butt, LOL. Kiera says, so proofreading, yeah. A sanity check is just like what I'm calling it just on this live stream. Proofreading, maybe is probably the more technical term. Just like trying to catch any silly mistakes. In the video I did on beta readers, I talk about alpha reading, beta reading, and gamma reading. Alpha reading is like you write the proto draft in this case, maybe make some changes, and then you share it, in this case, with like other writing knowledgeable people before you get too far in the weeds to just be like, give me your thoughts. That was my understanding of alpha reading, if you want to look into it. I didn't do it here. I still haven't done it in Upon Careless Gray Hills. Beta reading, we talked about them in this step 5 here, beta reader-ish. And then gamma reading is essentially, I have some people that are planning on like buying the book. So like, I'm going to send them a copy beforehand and ask them, hey, let me know if you find any typos. How many alpha and gamma readers should you have? In the research I did for my beta reading video, alpha readers, it was really like 1 or 2. It was like if you have any author friends, because we all just happen to have author friends. If you happen to have some author friends, like you can go to them with your story, share it with them, and then maybe they're going to be like, okay, this is how you end your story, but like, what if you did this? Like, it's like that almost like a brainstorming session. That was my understanding of it. I haven't done it, so I can't really claim. Danish Pacer says, I have 2 alpha readers. I'd love to hear the kind of feedback maybe you've gotten for your alpha readers. Gamma readers, you know, I think sending it to anyone is probably a good step in the right direction just to get fresh eyes on it. I feel like I remember seeing a number of like 5, but for me, that may be like 10% of my sales. So, so maybe your mileage may vary. Shout out to those 5. All right. Mina says, one way not to care about grammar and typos is to write something that doesn't have those features. I do all of my note taking in Microsoft Edit. So Mina, it sounds like you want to avoid editing in the drafting process, right? And turn off all like those squiggly lines and everything. Do yourself a favor. Do not ask your professional copy editor friend to be an alpha reader. Kaylee, that sounds tough. All right. What is different about Upon Careless Gray Hills, my story I'm working on now? The current plan is proto-draft, which I did mostly in November on a very live stream just like this, and it was a lot of fun. After that, I did developmental edits, which is what I did last time. It was me going through and being like, I know this section didn't quite do what I needed it to do, or like, I know this section of the story, like, wasn't that impactful, or in my case, okay, here's some real talk for you, especially for those who have been part of the journey of Upon Careless Gray Hills. Since the very beginning, I had a very clear vision for what the climax of the story kind of should be. I had a specific location. I had a specific altercation where we're going to confront the killer. And I was inspired by that during my trip to Whittier that inspired this whole story. I went hiking on a glacier and I thought the location of being on a glacier like this is like an alien planet. It is so different. And our glacier hiking guide went up to one of these cracks and was like, peek over the edge. There's literally no way to tell how deep it goes. You cannot see the bottom. You cannot, like, if you fall in here, like, you could slide so far down, it is like impossible to rescue you. And I was like, dang, man, there is like a vivid scene in my head of something like this, right? This alien landscape, the isolation, throw in a blizzard, and all of this, tracking someone down through the glacier. And I went into my story to do that. And I built up the section. I had a whole section in the middle of Act 2 that was like kind of setting it up. I had 2 characters, the character and their love interest really kind of like finding this bonding moment, kind of going out on this date, doing this thing, learning about the process. It was cute. But as I got closer to the novel, I was like, it feels like it is way too shoehorned into the story. It didn't feel like naturally this is where the story needed to go. Now, look, I'm the author. I can make the story be whatever I want it to be. But I also think, in moments like this especially, like, you have this sort of gut feeling, that's like your story instincts taking over. And like, I listen to my instincts. So I finished my proto draft, and one of the big things I have to do in my second draft is completely change the ending and get rid of this section in the middle of me setting up this moment and repurpose this probably in some way that better fits the theme of the story and doesn't just say I need to have a cool scene dressing around the end of my story. Is that a kill your darlings moment? I think so. I think, yeah. I mean, I think especially as I'm getting through towards the end of the proto draft, I start to have very strong feelings about what the story needs versus like what my original plan was. Those things can definitely change. Like when I was writing Starlight Farms, it was only about, I was like a little over halfway and I didn't fully have the conclusion planned out. But I got to the point I was like, it totally makes sense for it to end like this. I know exactly how these characters need to be tried and challenged in order to have this successful ending. Now, whether or not I did that successfully, I felt like I did, but it felt like it was right for the story, and I hope anyone who read it also liked it. So, that happens. That happens. Amira says, I have a summary of a story without an end, so I changed stuff to get a working ending. Now the only thing the two stories have in common is that someone is called Thorin. I love it. Shout out Thorin. Sticking it out all the way to the end. Let's wrap up our section on editing, and then we'll get to some Q&A stuff. Developmental edits, second draft. In my current process, I have a deadline for when my draft needs to be sent to my developmental editor. W. Thorin. I love that. W. So what's going to change about this next edit? Well, I'm now going to be working with beta readers and developmental editors. So first off, things slow down. No way around it. I would love to have the story out by the end of the year, and I'm really trying to do that. But we're going to see how long it takes for these other things to happen because this is my first time doing them. So after my second draft, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through and I'm going to do general edits. This is, again, me just kind of really focusing on like the reading experience, maybe some like dumb typo kind of stuff that is like very blatant. If I made any notes for myself through the second draft, go back to them. And I do that as I'm drafting. I'll make a note and I'll be like, I really need to emphasize this point in this conversation because it's going to have a bigger payoff later. I don't have a better word than just general edits. Shamwell says, why did you skip the first draft? Oh, here, I'll change it. First draft. There we go. And in this case, my bad. In this case, after my general edits, it's going to go to the wife edits. Shout out to all the wives out there. Shout out to the wives doing editing. Revising. And just because I happen to have, I think, enough time to do all this, then it's going to go to developmental editing. Then I'll say revising, and then I'm going to send it out to beta readers, and then revising, and then, well, I'll probably go revising. This is me predicting the future now, so we'll see how accurate this gets. Who knows? This will probably be style and copy edit, style edit. Beta readers, revising. Yeah. So this one's process is a lot longer. Yes. And that's because there's more people involved now. I got to tell you, I'm being totally honest here. There's something really nice about it just being you. About just putting your head down and making the best thing you can make, putting it out in the world, and now it's everyone else's. Now it's no longer your story, it's the world's story. There is something really nice about that. And I'll tell you, if I had to estimate the production costs of Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs, I think I had the price of Scrivener that I paid for, Pro Writing Aid, cover, I think disregarding things like marketing and advertising, when it came to Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs, my entire budget was probably under, Scrivener's $60 one-time payment, if I remember correctly. Maybe it's $50. Pro Writing Aid I bought 5 years ago for a lifetime license. And I think my cover was like $300. There's something nice about that, because upon Careless Gray Hills, if we bring in those same costs, that means I paid for Scrivener, Pro Writing Aid, cover, developmental editor, beta readers, and I'll probably rely on friends for gamma readers. That number here, right here, a lot more than this number. Orchid Birch. I always have trouble saying your name. Did you buy Jesus Christ, ISBN number? My brain. No, I publish through Amazon, and I just did the Amazon exclusive thing. So the ISBN number was provided for that listing on Amazon. So the price of the ISBN number is now just included in that exclusivity with Amazon. Printing costs for the physical cover or the physical book included through, I mean, Amazon has gone as hard as they can to make self-publishing like as accessible as it can be, which you could say, and I would probably agree with you, it's probably a bad thing. How does anyone make any money off of this stuff? Oh, Shambles, you've just hit the ding, ding, ding. There's the $1 million question. I'll tell you right off the bat, the most lucrative thing you can do as an author is probably be an editor. Don't tell the editors I said that. But the how do you make money off this stuff? If you are writing a book for a quick buck, it's never gonna happen. Especially what we would call here as a high effort book. I mean, a physical copy of my book, I think I make $3 off of the sale. And the ebook, I make $2 something off of the sale. So, I mean, it's not a big turnover. The price for this is probably going to be more like, if I had to guess, in just including editors and like beta readers that I would want to compensate in some way, it's probably going to be close to $3,000 something. That's my speculation. I have not paid that amount yet, but that's my speculation. Now that is for editors, that's for cover, that's for the tools that I'm using, which I'm including in the cost here. Technically, the more I use Scrivener and Pro Writing Aid that I bought for a one-time fee forever ago, the cheaper they become per project, if you want to call it like that. But I don't really count them in the costs personally. And then you have all of marketing. Well, Shambles, here's the thing. I probably spent $300 on putting out Starlight Farms. I'm going to spend almost 10 times. Is that right? Yeah, like 10 times that amount on here just by including additional people. Will that make a better product? Almost certainly, in my opinion. Do you have to do that for every single book you put out? I would say your first book, do what I did. Find someone you can get some notes from. In my case, it was my wife. In your case, it may be a family member or a friend or a cousin or your partner. Here's the, I would say self-publishing can be as cheap as you want it to be. The only limiting factor then is going to be you. How much money do you want to put into it? How close of a traditionally published book are you trying to get to? And then another question to ask is, does it need to be? Think about that. We'll wrap it up here. A whole other conversation about Amazon advertising and marketing. One of the more lucrative things you can do as a writer is also write a series. Short little tidbit here. I wrote a standalone book, Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs. I'm not really planning on writing a sequel. I might write another cozy fantasy story one day, but not really planning on writing a sequel. And when I'm advertising that book, every time on Amazon, my ad is displayed, my promoted book is put in front of someone, and they click it, I get charged some money. That's how the ads work there. It's not paid per time it's on the screen, it's paid time per click. And so, best case scenario, I pay for an ad that's displayed to someone, they click it, they buy it. I've spent maybe $1 in advertising, and if they bought the physical book, I made $3. That's like the royalties and everything. Now, here's the thing. If you write a series of books, let's say you write the Dresden Files, right? Let's say you got 17 books in your series so far. You run ads on book number 1. Someone clicks on it, buys that first book, you made $3. They read it, they go to book 2, you made another $3. They read 17 books, you made $51 off of that $1 it took for advertising. So it makes sense if you look at on Amazon, and then you look at, okay, let me go check out Urban Fantasy. Book 47, or Romance, book 47 of the series doesn't make any sense. It's because now that one sale can lead to however many. So that's like, if you're trying to make it lucrative, if you're trying to do that, a series is a better idea than a standalone, just in reality. All that being said, we're going to do some QA kind of stuff, some question and answers. We have some questions that were posted on the Discord a while ago, and I would love to talk about some of them. I took some questions from this thread in the Discord to answer on a video because I could do a little bit more in terms of kind of presenting my ideas thoughtfully. A live stream is off the cuff. Nothing you're seeing here is scripted. This is pure, unadulterated, raw Carson. Oh God, don't say raw Carson. Someone stop me. So what are some other questions that came up in the Discord? Hello, hello, can you see me? Here's some questions that came up in the Discord, and I would love to talk about this, but also get your opinion on them. So, question number 1. Someone, in fact, I think Ruchi's in the chat. Someone had a question about tips on improving your prose, other than just writing more. How do you improve your prose? Now, this is a question I've been chasing down for 6 months. I don't know if you know this. I probably am not great at the consistency here. I told myself I was going to read 12 books, 1 book a month on writing prose to try to understand how to improve my prose, and then to put together one single reliable, source or video that you could watch that would kind of take everything I learned from those books, put it in one place. And here's what I've learned. I've learned, one, different people have different styles of learning, and a lot of what I see in prose books, it's not working for me, which is when, and I see, I've done at least 4 of these. I hope I had done more, but I think I've done at least 4. Here's the deal. If I'm reading a prose book and they say a sentence, here's the key to a good sentence. And they're like, you want it to be active, impactful. Like, here's like, you want to avoid passive voice. So you want it to be the noun to be here, all that stuff. And I'm reading that and I'm like, okay. And then in almost every prose book, they give you an example and they're like, this is like, here is like a line of good prose. And I'm like, okay, like I'm trying to internalize that. And then inevitably they'll be like, also, here's Charles Dickens with one of the greatest lines of prose ever written that doesn't do this rule. and it'll be a big chunk of text, and then they'll be like, wow, Charles Dickens really knew how to write, don't you think? And then we move on to the next thing. And I'm like, come on. You can't just sit there and tell me. You can't sit there and say, like, here's how you need to do things. But also, if you're really good, you can defy this rule and write something else. Because then I'm left thinking, like, okay, so if I feel like I can craft something good, I should just ignore this. And what I've come around to thinking, Dickens was a hack. What I've come around to thinking is that someone asked, what is prose? Prose is the word that we use when we're referring to your ability to put words down effectively. So this is saying a good prose, which is going to vary per genre, per your intention. Good prose is something that's evocative, descriptive, sensory, something that flows well. And maybe in another genre, good prose is something direct and actionable and pacing's really fast. What I've come around to think so far, and I'm still doing my series on prose, is that the number one thing is serving the reader. It's all about that reading experience. The question shouldn't be, am I writing this thing that's grammatically correct? The question should be, am I presenting this information in a way that's going to be the best for the reader? Now, here's the thing. Grammar exists to accomplish this. Grammar exists to make your writing best for the reader. What do I mean by that? Grammar is the set of standards that we've all, and maybe I shouldn't say all, predominantly as a society, we live in a society. You can write that down. Carson Long, 2025. Grammar is like the set of rules that we've defined to say, like, readable language follows these rules. So you should be writing grammatically correct things. So a question is, how do you learn to write grammatically correct? How do we write something grammatically correct? That does take some practice and some exposure. You could approach it with a grammar reference book. You could approach it by reading a lot and just seeing how words are put together. I cannot provide a good perspective on this because I was raised speaking English, and so my only knowledge of learning grammar was grade school, growing up, them teaching me grammar. I think a great person to go to about how do you go about learning grammar is maybe someone who's learned to write effectively in a different language. I'm American. I speak one language. Corby says the prose you use is audience dependent. Yes. I've also come around, and I didn't see this much in the different prose books I read, to the idea that different genres have different expectations on prose. And sometimes that can also be one of the main things that stops people from being able to read other genres, aka me trying to learn something from a romance book and just hitting a brick wall when characters are described as hot AF and being like, I cannot imagine the publisher was like, you know what? This character description's missing something. Throw in an AF. That happened. And so I was like, okay, that was Crave by Tracy Wolff. Me just trying to picking something on Libby, being like, I'll try a romance book. Did not love that. And then I tried another romance book, trying to learn how to build a good romance subplot in the story that I'm writing, trying to learn from the greats. And literally this spaceship is crashing down to an island, and the main guy character looks at the girl character, and I quote is like, even in the chaos, the ship rattling around us, she looked beautiful. And I'm like, bro, you're about to die. Kills me. But prose is different for the different genres. That's a great point. All right. So how do you make your prose better? I have found Dreyer's English so far to be my favorite book on prose. And here's what I would say. I see you guys in chat. Here's what I would say about making better prose. The number one thing I think you should do is put together a list of words you should not write. I think in fiction, there is a very specific kind of word. I don't know the technical word for it, but a very specific kind of word that just doesn't lend itself well to creative writing. And that's when you're writing in your description or your narration and you're using words like just. It was just some blah, blah, blah. Or you're using words like really. It was really dirty in here. Or using words like very. It was very dirty in here. That's when your prose can be improved by identifying these sort of like words that don't really need to be in your story, cutting them out, not including them in your writing, and choosing better words. What words shouldn't we write? I wish I had Dreyer's English open, I could tell you, but I have it on Kindle. But if you go watch my Dreyer's English video, I put that list on the screen. There's like 12 words. He's like, don't ever write these. Basically, hey, if there's one way that you could improve your prose, it's saying, here's words not to use. And either not to use because they're kind of crutches to trying to raise the stakes of something in your sentence, when a better word would do that. Also, something else I saw was that in that book, which was a really good book, by the way. I highly recommend Dreyer's English. If you find a sentence is coming out stilted, rewrite it. Duh. I don't know if this has ever crossed your mind. If something doesn't feel right, write it differently. It was probably more poignantly put in the book. All right. I'm pulling things off the dome piece. All right. I think that's probably a good way to start. How do you improve your prose? Figure out what words are appropriate for creative writing and what words you should try to avoid. Check out that video on Dreyer's English. There's a list of them. You can probably Google it, and I think it made a lot of sense. It's lots of words that you would use to try to bring a more evocative feeling to something. Instead of something being dirty, it's really dirty, when another word like decrepit would just bring more punch to your writing. I thought when it comes to, look, there's a huge conversation we could have about prose, but for an immediately actionable number one, just like, here's something you can do today, right now, to have better prose, that's a good place to start. What's happening in the chat? Suddenly, yeah. All right, I answered. Let's go to another one. Solitude with a Soul, who I think is in chat, maybe. Solitude with a Soul said, if you have a very profound magic system, how do you reveal various ways in which the system works without making it a massive info dump? Oh, info dumps. Is Solitude with a Soul here, or did they dip out? We'll see. We'll see. How do you handle info dumps? So this is going to be the hard thing, right? Especially if you're writing fantasy or science fiction. Do we have any fantasy or science fiction writers in the chat? I know we have Coraby. William, are you writing a fantasy or a science fiction? I feel like I remember reading something about a mature urban fantasy. Is that what we labeled it as? I don't know. I can't remember. Kiera's writing a fantasy romance. Young Legend fantasy here. Amira, yes I am. Isabel says I dabble. Cyberpunk. Zenderfall. Wait. Zenderfall is talking about In and Out. I've seen what you guys are saying in the chat. You're going to get the stream shut down. Urban fantasy, yes, yes. So the question, I'm trying to, maybe I should find a better way to get these questions on the screen. Let's do that. That way you're not just looking at me. Back to the big screen. The question was, if you have a very profound, magic system. Dang it. Hey. Okay. If you have a very profound magic system, how do you reveal the various ways in which a system works without making it a massive info dump? I got two recommendations here. Xanderfall says, can't sci-fi fantasy just be called sci fantasy, like romance fantasy is romantasy? Call it whatever you want. All right. How do you avoid the massive info dump? Here's three tips. Number one, here's a little secret all authors do when they have a big crazy new world to explore. Have your character be discovering the world with you. Right? Spaceship, traveling through space. This dude's cryogenic sleep pod malfunctions and he wakes up in the ship. Guess what? He's seeing the world for the first time just like the reader. Luke Skywalker, whipped away from his desert homeland, slowly, I guess, starts learning about Force and the Jedis. Why does that happen? Well, if he learns it slowly, so do you. And you get fed one piece at a time. Who else? Who else does that? I feel like, what's another good one? I feel just about every single urban fantasy is kind of like that. Corby says that was the approach in Rose of Sorrows. Main character knows very little about magic. Harry Potter. Love it. Right? That's one easy cheat code here, right? Put your character in a situation where they learn about the world, usually, ideally, through action and interaction. And that way your reader gets little bits at a time. Star Wars, Percy Jackson, great examples. Great examples. Right? So there's tip number one. If you have your main character start out the novel being the greatest assassin in the whole world, we don't get to learn with them as they figure out all the skills needed to be an assassin in the Assassin's Guild. And that would be a fun story to experience. So there's a reason why so many of the stories that have complicated worlds do it this way. They have that kind of character. Number two, start simple. The reader doesn't need to know everything right off the bat. And here's the thing. This is not writing advice. Oh man, I've been leaning into this. You know how people say this is not financial advice? This is not legal advice. This is not writing advice. Write your story however you want to get to the end. This is editing advice. After you've written that story, go back, start editing your story so that the reader is slowly exposed to the things they need to know as the story goes on. Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson does a lot of world building. But it starts with a dude walking through the fog and everyone being like, oh my God, he's not supposed to be in the fog. I heard the fog was poison. And then we find out, oh, who is this guy? And then he's in a city, and a girl who doesn't know how to use magic is being shown how to use magic. And so instead of being like, here's every single cool move you can use in this magic system, instead it's like, let's learn how to do the basics. And then through action later in the story, we see it used in 100 different ways, in really cool ways. Right? Number two is start simple, build on top of that. Number three is trust the reader to be in for the ride. Trust the reader to be in for the ride. I was reading a story lately. I'm reading 3 books currently. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. And I noticed something. That a specific location in the story had been built up throughout a whole big chunk of the book to be creepy. Ooh, but we don't know what's creepy about it. So when we have characters who end up at this location and then they're creeped out, We don't know why they're creeped out. We don't need to know why they're creeped out. But we're going to the author is trusting the reader to just be in there for the ride. We don't get all the information beforehand, but we're slowly teased along, and as a reader, I'm trusting the author that they're going to pay off on this. As the author, I'm trusting the reader to not be like, I don't get it. Close the book. It's not the best example, Salem's Lot. Old Stephen King. Honestly, here's something crazy. Salem's Lot is early Stephen King career. Dude's changed a lot. That'd probably be an interesting video, looking at his first book, Carrie, versus his latest book and seeing the differences. Be kind of interesting. So, tease it along, keep it simple, then build it more complex, trust the reader, and then lastly, you can structure your story in a way that naturally brings the world out and spoon feeds the reader a little bit at a time. Do you guys have any other questions about this concept while I dig up the next question? The evolution of Stephen King. Now, this next question, how do you disguise an info dump? Through dialogue. That's my number one. That's my number one tip. This was from Robert McKee's book, Dialogue. One of the biggest takeaways I got from his book, he was talking about pacing. And you're going to be like, whoa, I asked about info dumps and exposition. Well, bear with me. Because Robert McKee said that pacing is the rate that world building and exposition is done outside or through dialogue. Is that what the quote was? Basically, here's my thing. If you can present it in dialogue, you should. Because it does so much extra stuff than just tell the reader this is what the world's like. If you have two characters talking to each other, every time they deliver a line back and forth, you're learning a little bit more about who they are, what makes them different, what their relationship is, and now, because you're doing exposition through the dialogue, you're also learning about the world. Versus if you are doing it through just like your description of the world, if you're just like, this kingdom is run by an evil haunted king named Lazarus. That line does one single thing. It just says this is how the world is. So do it through dialogue. But if they live in the same world, why would they be talking as if they don't understand it? That's a good question. And I think you're imagining that the dialogue is going to be like, hey, Carson, is the evil haunted king Lazarus still on the throne today? Technically, dialogue does some world building, tells us about the current king. It's not usually going to be presented like that. Also, remember, dialogue is not just the words on the page. It's like the subtext. You know, maybe people are even afraid to name Lazarus, the haunted king. They whisper it. Now you're building up the fact that these characters have fear about this king. Why? Someone tells the story of King Lazarus to this new character who's slowly discovering the world along with us, our main character, our protagonist. Hey, we just talked about that. You know, there's things you can do. Dialogue, when we're talking about world building and dialogue, it is not a teacher giving a history lesson to the students. It does have a little bit more subtext to it. Let's go to our next question. Shambles, I'm glad to hear it. Next question. How do you keep yourself writing/working on the same story even if you've lost your initial excitement for it? Who here has ditched a story because they lost their excitement? I'll show a hand. Who here has ditched a story just because life got in the way and you were never excited enough to go back to it? Who here felt like when you picked up your story that you discarded however long ago, you felt like you couldn't get back into the story to continue it? Me. That's me. We all have. Ray says, I ditch them all the time, but eventually they come back. And that's good. That's a beautiful thing. Here's the thing. I think, first off, you should capitalize on the excitement of your story. If you are excited about a story, you should be like giving yourself every chance you have to write, because that is fun. That is the easiest writing you're going to be doing, is stories that you are passionate and excited for. But writing is a long form art. No way around it. Maybe you put together short stories and you're able to knock them out in a day or two. And maybe that's what you like to write. That's great. But if you're writing a long form novel, it's called long form for a reason. And it's because it takes a long time to put it together. And at some point, you will stop being excited about that story, and that's totally normal. But if you want to put a book out into the world, a long form book that you want to share with other people and be, proud that you put this thing together, I get it. We all, I think, want that. But the thing is, at some point, you will stop being excited about the idea just because you've spent so long in the weeds of your story. You have to find another way to keep going. Number one is discipline. Just sticking to a routine, showing up in front of the computer, putting down more words. Discipline's hard. No way around it. Number two, find something about your story that gets you excited again. I talk about this all the time. In Starlight Farm's Kennel for Talking Dogs, I had this epiphany moment where I suddenly realized halfway through the story, 20,000 words in, that I cared about these characters. And I hadn't really felt that before. Always before, for me, it was like, all right, I'm writing about these characters. I want to tell a good story. But finally, at some point in writing Starlight Farm's Kennel for Talking Dogs, I was like, wow, like, I want to bring these characters to the end of the story. So the excitement came back. The passion came back, not for the dreams of this book being a high-selling book and the feeling that it would, that I would have for putting a book in the world and being an author, but just for seeing the characters have their story completed. In this case, I knew it was going to be a happy ending. I wanted to give them that. And so then we had this positive feedback loop, and I will forever be chasing this feeling of writing, creating stories about my characters. Those stories developing makes me excited to write. Writing, being excited for my characters, making me want to write. Boom, 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 positive feedback loop. I couldn't be stopped. I hope that happens with Upon Careless Gray Hills. Arthur says, still unsure if I should start writing with a short story first or just continue writing it. Are you talking about, Arthur, your longer work? There's definitely some value in finishing something. You're going to learn way more in you finishing a story than you ever would from a YouTube video or a bomb, killer, awesome YouTube live stream. All right. Hey, Orchid Bursch. God, killing me. Bursch says, I've written over 6 novels in the last 20 years. I always fall in love with my characters, and I always go back to finish each book. That is awesome. That is awesome. I love that. All right. Any other questions in regard to that? Let's keep schmoovin'. Let's keep schmoovin'. Let's take a quick win. Let's do a quick question. This one's easy. What inspires you to write? I think there's probably a million poignant answers to this, where you're going to say the art of storytelling, connecting with people, building worlds, having people see the building that you've done, the satisfaction of completing an art, seeing an idea to the end. But I think it's just all, I think some people like telling stories. I like telling stories. Frey's all about that moolah. I get that. I get that. I get that. Zinderfall asked earlier if posting on Wattpad counts as published. It's going to be up to, I think really each person's going to have a different idea of what that is. Like, I think you can be public. I think you can share your writing publicly. Is self-publishing and traditional publishing different? Is being published having a company put your book out? Or is being published sharing your writing with the world? In my opinion, the divide is when you, here's the way I always phrase it. I think that personally there's a difference between the level of support I want to give someone who is writing versus pursuing the profession of authorship. And I almost equate it to like the friends I had growing up who were really interested in music. I had a lot of friends who played instruments, and I had very few friends who were trying to make a living off of their music. And what was the difference between the two? The people who liked making music were writing songs that they wanted to share with other people. They were jamming in open mics. They were playing the songs that they had played. But the people who were pursuing a living through their music were investing in engineers, were going out and doing tours. There was a different sort of investment in that sort of pursuit versus just the pursuit of the art. And so I kind of see published authorship and writing, even if you're sharing your writing publicly, as different. Now, I think there is a premium option in Wattpad or Substack. I'm less familiar with those platforms, but the level of support I want to give someone who is putting in the money and effort to develop a book that's going to try to financially support themselves, I want to give them, an extra layer of support. All those friends that I had growing up that were trying to make their name in music, I was telling other people about their music. Oh, you love that band? My friend Colin is in this incredible local band. It's called blah, blah, blah. You should check them out. They sound just like this. They're for fans of these other bands. Like, they actually have a show on Friday. You should come out. I'll be there, right? That's a different level of support than someone who has, written a song, shared it publicly, and I'm like, that was really great. That was really pretty. Maybe I'm even telling them, you should go and try to record that and put that out into the world and make a living off of it. There's a difference. There is a divide. Now, does that mean, and I haven't looked in the chat, but I feel like the question coming up here is going to be, does that mean if you're not charging an amount of money for your art, that you're not an author? And I don't think so. If you really wanted to, you can, put your book on Amazon that you've written for free. You don't even have to charge for it. If you go through Draft 2 Digital, I believe is what I was reading most lately, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting fact. They were like, can you post your story for free on all these other online marketplaces? And they were like, yes, we support the ability for an author to charge $0.00 for their work. So, I mean, I just see it as different between those two things. Typically because the amount of investment someone's making tends to be different as well. But you know what? Everyone's going to have their own sort of thing. That's where I kind of see the transition between someone who's writing because they love to write and they want to put, let's say they put something out on AO3 or they put something out on fan fiction or they put something out in Substack or Medium or whatever it may be. That's one thing. And then I put in $3,000 something into trying to make this the absolute best product that I can. And I'm trying to turn this into something that is going to financially support my family. Everyone's going to have maybe a different sort of thing there. That was a long way to say that, but there you go. Okay, what inspires you to write? I think we probably got that solved. We solved it. What else? We got something here. Here's a good one from a user named Gress. I don't know if I've seen Gress in a live stream before. What are the odds that Gress is in the live stream right now? Next question. How do you make every character follow a consistent theme without making them all feel the same? How do you make every character follow a consistent theme without making them all feel the same? I think what I get from this question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is someone who has a theme for their story, thinking that all of their characters also need to share the theme of the story. When I don't necessarily think that is necessarily true. For example, I may have the theme of my story be that the family you find is more important than the family you have. Okay. That's the theme of my story. The plot is going to reflect that. I may make some story decisions that kind of draw some analogous situations through imagery and situations that kind of reflect that. But my character, maybe I'm going to say this character is going to have like a coming of age story. They're going to find their responsibilities, like this is what they're going to do. I'm going to have another character, a rich, snobby person who has been spoon-fed their whole life, who is now going to come out of their naivete. Why does that sound so country when I say, is it naivete? Am I crazy? Is naivete a word? Someone back me up here. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Foire syllables. Is that like foie gras? Foie gras? Sound like I'm a Georgia peach. Naivete. Y'all have that naivete? Thank you, Frey. I appreciate that. Shout out, Frey. So we have the theme of the story, right? But the theme of the character doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same thing. Someone else made a great point. You can specifically also choose to have a character who has a theme going completely opposite. And the thing is, like, the theme of a character is going to reflect in like how you portray that character, their actions, their decisions, their dialogue, their word choice. Maybe it's also going to be how you actually structure the character as like, who is this person who's going to be in my story? But the theme of your overall story is going to impact so many other things. So two kinds of themes. Boom, quick one, knocked out. Let's get one that's going to cause a schism in the crowd. Okay. Let's divide the audience. Let's alienate some people. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Someone asked, how to write a truly memorable book? And I'm going to twist this a little bit. And I'm going to ask you, what makes a great book? What makes the kind of book that becomes your favorite book of all time? What qualities do you identify in the stories that you love the most? Because there are plenty of good stories. Look, Sometimes you read a story and you're like, ah, that was a fun story. Sometimes you read a story and you're like, this is my favorite book of all time. Oh my God. What's the difference between those two things? What qualities do you find in those favorite books of all times? Thick9 says people remember upsetting things more easily than good things. So a book that really upsets somebody will be more memorable. Make it very, very, very controversial. Oh, brother. People will talk about it for a long time. Lolita, prime example. A book that gives you something that stays with you. Amira, be more specific. What do you mean by that? What kind of things stay with you? What kind of things stay with you? Kaylee says, for me, it's if the book actually ties in with the struggle I'm currently going through. So that's you relating to the story. You read it at the right point of life, and it clicked. Young Legend says, do something evil to your reader's favorite character. Seeing lots of trauma? Seeing lots of trauma in the chat? I love an ending that lingers, the final impression. So, Isabel, in order for a book to be, let's say, a contender for your favorite of all time, would you say how much of that story's impact on you is the conclusion? Do you feel like it's weighted? Because the conclusion's the last thing that you read for a story. That's the thing that's the most freshly on your mind. Do you think a book with a great conclusion is more important in quality than a book with a great intro? There's a good question for you. Shambles also says it's all because of the ending. Corby says a well-crafted story. I can connect with the characters in the world. Another vote for relatability. Let's jot some of these down. Dang. Relatability. Timing. Crisis. Yeah. We also had conclusion. Story that ends strong. Connected with the characters. I see you, Frey. Connect with the characters. Depends on the ending. Trauma stays with you. Sad face. We have a great time in this chat. What else we got? Write odd, but make it make sense. You know, Day Swaller, I can't say that surprises me. Yeah. All right, Mina says, fluffy books to escape the world. Okay. Escapability. What are some other qualities of those greatest books? Corby says unanswered endings, another sort of conclusion. Frey caught me exposed. So here's the thing. Let's talk about relatability. I think this is a big thing. I think, of course, it's totally natural that the stories you love the most are the ones that you felt like you discovered at the perfect time. You know? I mean, how many 11-year-olds read the first Harry Potter book, watched the first Harry Potter movie, and then crossed their fingers and were wishing for that letter to come through the chimney saying they were invited to Hogwarts? Did we have any... we have anyone in chat who was a Hogwarts baby? Any Hogwarts babies in the chat? Because I feel like that was a big thing for a lot of... Isabel says, I was exactly that age and was mad when my letter didn't come. Thick9 had another version of this experience, wanted to collect the 7 Dragon Balls. See Shinron in the sky. Escapism 101. Yeah, so I think I wasn't much of a Harry Potter fan, but even I wanted to go to Hogwarts. I didn't read the Harry Potter books, and let me finish. Let me finish. I didn't read the Harry Potter books. Let me finish. Guys, let me rephrase. I haven't read the Harry Potter books. Oh, so good. I've read 5, I think. All right. I'm not alone in chat. Let's go. My older brother read the Harry Potter books, and it was like him or me. That was kind of how we divided things. There was very few things there was overlap that we liked. So he was like going to the midnight releases for the new Harry Potter books. He was the one who was like, you know, reading the series of unfortunate events as they were coming out. And I was over here reading some old Dragonlance fantasy novels thinking like, God, dragons are cool, dude. Oh, so good. Okay. Relatability, big thing. How do you control that as an author, though? Is that by choosing to write a topic? I guess in order for a book to be relatable, I feel like there's 2 things that need to happen. One, your book needs to have a certain level of specificity. And of course, present it correctly. So you kind of have to plan the story out as like that being one of the major themes. But then also, here's the thing. Number 2, you have to get the book to the right people. And that's not as easy as you think it is. Tracy Hickman, Dragonlance, let's go. Shambles says it has to be specific enough to resonate, but broad enough to apply to a lot of people. To me, this reminds me of the genre of work that Coraby recently talked about on the Discord of oh crap, what's it called? Hold on. I'm gonna get there. Upmarket. There it is. I watched Alyssa's video on that. Upmarket fiction. Let me pull that up. I'll show you what Corby was talking about. Upmarket fiction as a genre, which I think a lot of us in the Discord, including me, were like, wait a minute. When I read a description of upmarket fiction, it's just all of the qualities of a good book. It's like upmarket fiction is a book that has it's well written. It has an exciting plot. It's character driven. And it has popular themes. And I was like, wait a minute. That's just a good book. Hold on. Let's go to an actual good source. Let's not get a Google AI. Let's go to Reedsy. I like Reedsy. Here we go. Upmarket fiction. Blending elements from literary fiction and commercial fiction. We're gonna need more context on this. Shambles, are you sure I'm having lag, or sometimes do I just take a little bit longer to think? Amira says, what is middle market? Sometimes I've heard that referred to as like kids fiction, kids books. All right. Where's our fiction marketed to the widest possible audience? I guess that's why the important things are how well written it is. Because what is marketed to the widest possible audience is something that can probably change based on what themes are most prevalent in popular fiction. Okay, here's upmarket bestsellers. The Help, Big Little Lies, Call Me by Your Name. Here's the tough part. I feel like I feel like whenever I read an example of what an upmarket fiction book is, it's just a bestseller. It's just like, what's upmarket? I guess whatever is up in the market. Boom, he's cracked the code. Whatever is up in the market is upmarket. Or it's commercial fiction with something to say. Oh, A Fault in Our Stars. See, but here's the thing. I never in my life would have been like, Gone Girl isn't a thriller, it's upmarket. So it sounds like this is just a tag for something that's popular. I don't know, Market. What's up with you? Boom! I need a little air horn sound. That's an air horn worthy joke. Oh man. So yeah, I'm still a little confused on this because it seems to be up. Here's maybe another way to think about it. When I think of book genres, a lot of times I'm thinking of, I'm sitting down and I'm writing a book that's going to meet these certain conventions about what's going to be like in the top, the themes. So like if I'm writing a fantasy novel, the world has to be prevalent, the world building. It has to be something that is uniquely fantasy. If I'm writing science fiction, I'm leaning more into how this technology affects the world. Maybe there's this element of philosophy. But it seems like upmarket, in my interpretation of it, is not something that is defined in any way, but just highlights the top trends. It's almost like this was successful. How do we get more books like that? That's my interpretation of it. And also when we see this little term up here, blending elements from literary fiction and commercial fiction categories, what do you think that means? Because to me, blending elements of literary fiction and commercial fiction categories, to me, just sounds like it is written in descriptive prose. Commercial fiction, I think, in my understanding of it, is just think like James Patterson. Think like again, it's just, I think, a term for like popular things. We live in a society. I'm surrounded by society. All right, let's go back to this. Now, I was thinking about this the other day. I said this in one of my videos. I said that the conclusion of a book is the last thing your reader remembers, especially when they're like writing the review of the book after they finish it. Whether that be the day of them finishing it or like recently. Do you think a good conclusion can make up for other elements of a book that may be lacking? Does a really good conclusion make up for characters that aren't as strong? William, that was definitely one of the other upmarket things. Character-driven stuff. Definitely. Hey, ain't nothing wrong with romance. Ain't nothing wrong with the romance genre. I still believe there is a romance book out there that I will pick up and love and learn a lot from. I think you can't really plan to write a truly memorable book because it has to come at the right time for the right person. Yeah, in the video I put out on Monday, I talk about how hard it is to get a book to the ideal reader. I wish it was easy to be like, I know you're going to love this book, so I got to get it to you, and you'll buy it and read it and love it. If only it was that easy. All right. Let's pull back off the romance. We may have some romance lovers in chat, and maybe they'll have great recommendations, but clearly Crave by Tracy Wolff, while also being the subject of one of the like craziest literary controversies I've ever heard of, is maybe just not for me. A bad ending can make a good book mediocre. I think it's less that a good ending saves a bad book, but a bad ending can make a good book mediocre. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the last thing here. Escapability. What makes a truly memorable book? One of the things was escapability. What do you think we mean by escapability? This was the term I pulled from the chats because a lot of the truly memorable books, as people were trying to identify qualities, people saying like disappearing into the book, you know, like that feeling of like it sucks you in and you don't pay as much attention to the things going on like in life. How immersive is it, Isabel says? Does it feel real? Corby says, for romance writers and lovers, I'd recommend watching Shirley Jumps videos. Hey, shout out Shirley. And don't call me Shirley. God, he's done it again. He's done it again. I think Mina was talking about books you can lose yourself in. Yeah, makes you forget about real life. Don't think it has to be real to feel real to be escapism. I don't want to think about spreadsheets anymore. Please take me to a fantasy land. That's relatable. Leave real life out. Okay. So this is also like a very personal thing, right? Because I think we all like escaping into different worlds. Someone's going to pick up Stephen King's The Dark Tower and be like, I want to be lost in this world. It's so gritty and crazy. Someone's going to pick up Lord of the Rings and think that it's beautiful. And someone's going to pick up The Expanse and think about how cool it might be. Or read the Murderbot novellas. Or watch the Murderbot show, which I finished last night. And it was really good on Apple TV. Check it out. But I also feel like you cannot have escapability without the book being written in like an effective way. Of course, world building has to be done right, but also like I feel like you only escape into the world through the lens of the character. So even a book that's all that sucks you into its escapism, like the characters are a major part of that, right? I think the prose in describing the world has to be vivid enough, right? That it sucks you in, that you start picturing that instead of your spreadsheets in QuickBooks. Any QuickBooks fans out here? Shout out QuickBooks. I guess you don't escape in a bad or mediocre book. I think you can escape you can find that comfort in just about anything, but I think that like a book that really pulls you in from all of its elements. I'm trying to think of some other good examples. What are some other good examples? You want to escape to meet the people in the book? Not a bad idea. I wouldn't want to live in Middle Earth or Westeros. Look, the fantasy world that is the most daunting, scary, don't want to live in has to be the book from Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Or as the author calls it, Malazan, Book of the Fallen. I'm on book 8 out of 10. Would not want to live there. They go hard. All right, this is interesting. This is interesting. I'm taking notes. Frey caught me earlier. Now I know how I need to write my next book to have one of the all-time greats. Who knew it was just writing a good book and also keeping it relatable? Let me tell you about the book, and we're going to wrap this up. Let me tell you about the book that has recently become my favorite book of all time. And why? Because that's the last truly memorable book that really stuck with me. All right? I've had 3 favorite books of all time in my life, which, when you average it out, is about 1 book every 10 years that I read where I say, this has changed me, and I'll never go back to the way I was before. Frey says something unhinged. Who could have seen this coming? You chaos gremlin. The first book I remember reading and being like, oh my God, I didn't know books could be like this. For me, was being like 8 years old and reading Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. The characters were so well done. The world was fun and exciting and yet grounded in a reality we all know very well. It was based in a school, which school was the majority of my life at 8 years old. So it felt very natural. Had a big twist ending. Set me up in such a way where I was like, oh my God, books can be this exciting, this poignant, right? 8 years old. That book would go on to be my favorite book until I was about 21 years old. 21, I read East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which is a multi-generational story that follows mainly a set of brothers, Adam Trask and shoot, what was his? Was it Cain Trask? Filled with biblical analogy, right? And I read that and I was like, wow, like these characters, first off, I've lived their entire life with them. I read when Adam Trask was learning to walk. I read when Adam Trask was, the favorite of his father and how it infuriated his brother and his brother tried to kill him. I was there when Adam Trask ran away to go into the army. I was there when he came back ashamed. I was there when he fell in love and had kids and when his wife... Spoilers. Never mind. But yeah. You see where I'm going with this. I was there for all of it. I was there when he was an old man. I was there when he wouldn't name his 2 children. And I was there when he passed away and we followed the kids. His entire life. And it was at a point, and here's about the relatability, when I was there when it was written in stone. Yeah. Which at 21, I think you're really focusing on sort of what's next in your life and your purpose and the value that you're going to be able to bring to the world and how you're going to leave your mark. And so viewing an entire life and at the end being able to look back on everything that happened to that character and known where those important moments were, very poignant to me. And then last month, it all changed. My favorite book of all time at 30 years old changed. I'll bring it up here. Yeah, your boy's 30. There's some Carson lore for you. I'd like to introduce you now to my new favorite book. Boink. This is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. And I think of all the books I've mentioned, maybe the book that has the least amount of ratings, at least here on Amazon, maybe also on Goodreads compared to the other two. This book, I think, is one of those books, and I kind of equate Ender's Game to this as well. When you read Ender's Game at 8 years old and you get these takeaways from it, and then you go back to Ender's Game at 20 something and you read it again, you have a whole different perspective on how to interpret everything that's happening. When you're a kid, everything happens to you. You're told where to go. Ender's told where to go. You experience that story from the perspective of someone who's in Ender's shoes. But if you go back and read it when you're 20 something years old, you're looking at it as the eyes like of an adult who can make their own choices and find their own path, and has to, because no one's there to tell you what to do next. And so now you're seeing it in a different light, and now you feel a little bit sorry about what's happening to Ender. Boy's Life, I think, has that same sort of relatability, where reading this, maybe if I had read this when I was in high school, would have a very different perspective reading it when I'm 30. And the whole reason I read this book is because my favorite book reviewer, this guy named Patrick Leo, you can find him on YouTube. He has a ton of great, also Goodreads reviews. I've gotten almost all of my books in the past 5 years off of recommendations from him, because I just found someone whose tastes align so good with me. All right. That's one of the great things about finding a creator you connect with like that. This book, I'll let you go read your own description, but it follows an 11-year-old kid in 1960s Alabama, and it does a really good job at portraying a couple things. One is when you're a kid and your parents are going through life struggles, and how you're kind of you're trying maybe to be sheltered from that. Everyone's experience is going to be different, but kind of they try to keep you sheltered from, finance troubles, maybe whatever else is going on. Someone lost their job, but as a kid, you see more than that. You pick up on that. And also, prose in this book is amazing, incredibly well written. And it's another book where you see this character as a kid and you see them much later as an adult. It's really good. So if you're looking for a new book to read, I hope you have the same experience that I did, and I hope you enjoy it. So I just wanted to tell you about that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you for the next 30 minutes all the good things I thought about this book. Anyways, I think it would be really interesting to gather a bunch of people's favorite books and sort of figure out what are some of the similarities between them. Is it almost always people finding a book at the right time? Are there elements in there that just seem to work better and leave an impact on people? Is it dealing with themes of life and death and love? Or is it helping you escape those things? Favorite books. Kaylee Dragonfly says Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Aren't they making a new animated series for Avatar? Shambles, I'm one of the most recent books I've read is my favorite book kind of guys. Yeah, I get that. It's interesting. Anyways, for those who this is your first time at a Writing Theory live stream, I hope you had a good time. It usually is pretty fun. I like to think so, especially when we're doing things like writing on stream, or if we are editing some community works on stream, talking about chapters. We had a great time. Last time we had Day Swallower, who submitted a crazy story for us to read and react to, and it was a blast. We don't do these super frequently, but in November you can look forward to some more Novella November, which I'll be live streaming my own writing process, and you can see exactly how it looks. I have some really big video plans coming up. I've been trying to balance lately work and life and writing and video content. And of course, every video I make, I feel like it's, is pretty good. But I'm really excited. There's basically, I think in the next month or two, there's going to be a new era, I think is a good way to say it. This channel is now a juggling channel. Only juggling content. I am now the juggler. They call me the juggler. Yeah. That seems like a good note to end on. Again, link in the Discord if you like the hat. I'm going to make this logo a little bit smaller for future hats, but yeah, pretty cool. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope to see you guys all again. I'm glad that the internet seemed to work for everyone but Shambles. Shambles, I'm sorry you had to deal with some lag. I am going to go do some writing and make some progress on my second draft. And I will see you all later. Have a great night. Take care. I hope to see you next time. I'll see you in the Discord. Talk to you later. How do I get out of here? Hold on. No one look at me. Okay.